Lil Peep's body was found by his tour manager, Steve Paul. He had burst into the tour bus to wake Peep for his performance just a few minutes before he was due on stage, only to find the 21-year-old laying completely still, pale as a ghost, head thrown back. He had no pulse and wasn't breathing. Peep's other tour manager began applying chest compressions, and paramedics arrived just 10 minutes after the body was found. They administered Narcan, dextrose, and epinephrine. Nothing was working. Efforts to resuscitate Lil Peep were unsuccessful, and so were the team's attempts to keep word from getting out. Nearly 1,000 fans spilled into the street, and chaos was unleashed. People were fighting, crying, and screaming. It was a single moment of pure emotional destruction that will live on forever in the minds of millions. Lil Peep was seen alive for the last time by Steve Paul at 6:40 p.m. on the evening of November 15, 2017, just a few hours before he was supposed to start his performance at The Rock in Tucson, Arizona. Steve Paul, as well as Peep's opening artist, Bexy, who had taken a now infamous video of Peep just a few minutes earlier, didn't notice anything was wrong, because they both thought Peep was sleeping. But as it would turn out, Peep's snoring was not in fact normal. Rather, it was a symptom of him slowly dying from an accidental fentanyl overdose. As the storm following Peep's untimely death finally began to clear, it was ruled an accident, caused by the deadly combination of fentanyl and Xanax. But it wasn't that simple. In fact, it wasn't simple at all. Peep's death resulted in a chaotic storm of accusations, investigations, and lawsuits from all sides. The search for someone to blame for his death continues to this day. But in this video, I'm not going to talk about whose fault it was. Instead, I want to look at how Lil Peep's life, death, legacy, and music can teach us about ourselves and each other. Lil Peep's life, up until around late 2015, was pretty normal. His parents both went to Harvard, as did his grandparents. They were a high-functioning family with a long history of success. Peep was born in 1996 in Allentown, Pennsylvania, a small city that Peep's mom said was pretty dead when they lived there. She told Pitchfork that they didn't have much to do in Allentown, so she would stay at home and play with Peep and his brother most of the time. They moved to Long Island in 2001, and Peep's mom said that he started taking dance lessons around this time. Peep was a gifted dancer, but after just a few years, he started to feel self-conscious as a guy doing tap dancing and ballet, and he stopped taking lessons. His mom told Pitchfork that she tried to encourage her son to keep trying, but he just didn't feel comfortable dancing anymore. Peep's mom, Liza, taught her son to be an empathetic socialist who cared about the bigger picture. They had a great relationship, even though Liza often talks about struggling to understand what exactly her son needed. Peep's parents never really got along, and when his history professor dad left the picture in 2012, Peep really started to struggle. It was also around then that Peep started suffering from intense anxiety and depression. It was hard for him to feel motivated to go to school, and he quickly turned to self-medicating with things like Xanax and weed. At the same time, his dream of making music professionally was only getting stronger. He dropped out of high school and got his diploma online, and then moved to LA in 2013, when he was 17. He wasn't even old enough to sign a lease, so he slept on people's couches. He quickly returned to Long Island and changed his name from Trap Goose to Lil Peep, in honor of a nickname his mom had given him when he was young. Peep's first project, Lil Peep Part 1, was released in 2015. It gained over 4,000 streams in its first week on SoundCloud, and things only started moving faster from there. Peep joined Goth Boy Clique a year later, and just a few months after that, Pitchfork named him the future of emo music in an article that looked at Peep as a continuation of the emo tradition, begun by Kurt Cobain so many years ago. The Pitchfork article inspired more and more profile pieces, including one by Noisy. Peep's effortless mixture of rap and emo rock was taking the industry by storm. He rapped with equal apathy, both about the women he's known and his desire to die. A lot of emo people declined to claim Peep, though, and so did a lot of rap fans. He was just somewhere in the middle, a young kid in a lot of pain, trying to use music to feel better. It was a brilliant, effortless mix of insider style with outsider attitude that resulted in Peep walking at fashion events in Paris and Milan, while simultaneously being seen as a musical dirtbag. Peep's first album, Come Over When You're Sober, was released just 4 months after the Noisy article. It received massive attention, and he was on the verge of becoming a pop culture icon. The hard work, the long nights, the unsteady living situations, the depression and anxiety, it was all paying off. And then, he died. I think we can all say that even if we maybe don't see parts of him in ourselves, we know people who identify with Peep in some way or another. An ex, a cousin, a friend from school. Peep personified the darkest parts of our generation's collective unconsciousness. But how did he effortlessly merge pedestrian, teenage, punk, and emo with hard-hitting hip-hop? He did it by being surprisingly normal. Because Lil Peep's upbringing was, for all intents and purposes, safe. He wasn't raised in a burned-out urban ghetto, like many rappers his age. Rather, he grew up in Long Island, a part of New York State that's mostly known for how normal it is. Peep was into normal things growing up. He liked video games and skateboarding. He listened to a lot of Brand New and Avenged Sevenfold. He was honestly kind of a stereotype. Not that that's a bad thing, because it's not. What I mean is that Peep became so popular because he drew his creativity from things that we all understand. He was just so sensitive to fame and the stress of touring. His platform was too much to handle. I kind of see it as a metaphor for the rest of us, too. So many of Peep's fans have been through more than is healthy for young people to go through, and Peep understood that. He may have not had the most depressing or the most broken upbringing, but he was a true artist. Things affected him strongly, and it gave him a powerful but fragile view of the world. I think what people misunderstand the most about Lil Peep is that he saw the world as a miserable, gray landscape, lacking hope or beauty. I don't think that was the case at all. I think Lil Peep saw life as beautiful. But the beauty that he did see was sadly outweighed by the tragedy that filled his mind. And ultimately, it was too much for him to handle. He was overwhelmed by the nature of his fame, and he used drugs as a coping mechanism. The knowledge that he had countless fans looking at him as a role model, a superhero, it was a tremendous weight on his shoulders. Lil Peep provided a voice for the anxieties that all of us feel. He provided a voice for victims of abuse and bullying. But he had his own demons too, and the pressures of the success that he had wanted for so long are ultimately what took his life. I think the biggest lesson that we can learn from the story of Gustav R. is about the importance of taking care of ourselves. Lil Peep's close friend and producer, Smoke-a-Sack, wrote in a memorial on his website, "Peep would want me to tell everyone to support your friends. Watch their back. If they're struggling with issues that are too big for them to manage, get them to seek professional medical attention. Don't try and find your answers in the street." The story of Lil Peep is heartbreaking, but it's also a reason to have hope. His life was beautiful, but he lacked the support to make it through alive. By learning from his tragedy, we can make the world a better place. We can look after each other with more care and pay better attention to what's going on around us, because it's hard to tell when someone is really suffering, even if it's the main focus of their art. Lil Peep will live on in our hearts forever. His story reminds us that even though life can be violent, dark, and unfair, beauty can still be found if you're willing to look for it.
That's why she texts me and tell me she love me. She know that someday I'll be over the city, making my money and smoking my weed. I think it's funny, she opened up to me, get comfortable with me. Once I got it coming, I love her, she love me. I know that I'm nothing like someone the family want me to be. If I find a way, would you walking with me? Look at my face while you talking to me, cause we only have one conversation a week. Can I get one conversation at least? Shout out to everyone making my when I'm falling to pieces.